gotta have a 3-car garage, you don't even, or you're just done with it.
We're going to pull that together. I want to pull everybody back
I'm with
together
them.
so that we can move on to the next
I am.
part of it.
I work with your eyes.
I don't get it.
Okay, let's try it again.
Maybe you'll want to.
2-minute warning or something. What's up, Kim?
I don't know how to turn it on.
Is that a 2-minute warning?
I hope that you'll finish your conversation later. I'm sorry to break it off. I want to just ask the group, did you find anything that struck you as really strong commonalities in the discussions that you had? I see a yes. Do you want to share like commonalities over what?
Well, I think it's mostly about enjoying where we live and having very specific reasons for living here and wanting to keep some essence of that going forward. Questions like how do you age in Waunakee, you know. So I think that both of us really like it here.
So a commonality here of liking it here. Was that, other people heard that commonality?
We had an interesting commonality here, which was, I said it was like a Rush song, but we came from small towns, went to a bigger place, and then wanted to get back to the suburbs, and this was what was chosen. So it was interesting.
Okay, so commonality in what brings people here. Other commonalities?
School system.
School system is a real draw.
I think we just have some personal commonalities with our backgrounds and where we're coming from within our age and what was going on at the time that we were young people. And we shared some of those same kinds of experiences with similarly dynamic family life around us. So, and how that brought us, here and why we're here.
And that's a really interesting thing to question, to ask. Are people coming to the community who have some similarity in background that creates this desire to be in a community like that? That's interesting. What about differences? Did any of the conversations, right away, yeah?
I would say I'm the difference in our group. So these two came from small towns, feel that way about Waunakee, feel like it's friendly and well clean. I'm from a larger city, and my husband and I moved to a neighborhood in Waunakee, and all of our neighbors have kids, literally every single one of them, and we don't feel it's inclusive at all. So I kind of feel the opposite way.
Okay. And that also, very important thing to pay attention to is that the perception is different for different people depending on their background, on their situation.
But I'm the minority in the neighborhood, so.
Okay. Interesting. Others, were there other points that came out that either surprised you or differences amongst respondents?
We didn't get to develop it much, but coming from Madison and living in a close in city in Madison, I grew up in a town of 8,000. So my sense of everyone knowing each other and you didn't do anything bad because your mom's going to hear about it before you get home, kind of atmosphere, and coming to Waunakee and being an outsider. I'm only 15 years here. Being an outsider, it's taken a while to break into that kind of sense of community, and it's only by getting involved like this and kind of my push that I think it's starting to happen. And we built a business here.
So there's a whole bunch of things in that statement to unpack, a whole lot of things. A community where people take care of one another, but different people have different experiences with that. I wish my community would watch my kids, because that way I'd know when they're in trouble. But there's that whole issue. There's the issue of what's a newcomer. 15 years, is that a newcomer? I've heard some communities 30 years is a newcomer. 40? So when do you feel comfortable in your community? And so The reason that we did this exercise is for you to get a sense of how asking can bring up some of these perceptions about community and really uncover what is going on underneath the surface in that community. I'm going to then turn this back to Kristen to talk about community identity survey and how that's used to try to pull forth information about the community.
And Mary Ellen, did you have? Oh, yeah.
We love the feel of the small town and are terrified that the need to grow impinges on the great agricultural farmland that surrounds us, and that we may not be able to grow without destroying farmland.
Thank you for that comment, because you brought up a fear. And it's actually two fears. One is the small town feel, that connected feel, that you could lose that if you grow, and the feel of being in a rural community with farmland and farmland loss. So that's really important also to bring forth those kind of community perceptions, the fears, the hopes, the expectations. Thank you. So I'll let you work with it.
All right, so now we'll talk about the survey. And everyone should have a copy of that stapled to your agenda. This is what I set up. There are spelling mistakes and punctuation errors, and at one point I say 60,000 and I mean 50,000. There are lots of mistakes, there always is in a survey. It keeps us all on our toes in the draft stage. I like to use that as the excuse, but sometimes it's just you do something 100 times and you fail to see the mistakes that you make. So why are we discussing the survey? It would have been easy to just present it to everyone and say, here's a survey that we're going to do, and here's what it's going to tell us. But I get the feeling that this is not the kind of group that you're probably fine with that. Everyone's like polite, but you're an interested, active group, and this is your information, and it's designed to help you answer the questions that you want answered and give you the take on the community that you want. So I thought we would take this up today. So we'll talk about within this, as we're going along, what information you see in here that you could use, what information might be missing, and then we'll review and revise the survey. There are some things, there isn't a single thing on the survey that we have to ask. We don't have to keep it all, we don't have to keep any of it. We can keep it all and adopt it whole. If you want to do that too, that's cool. The printed copies are just a starting point. I'll say this time and time again, because we're all, for the most part, like a polite sort of people, that we have a hard time in the upper Midwest, do we not, saying that's just a really bad idea. Like being like honest in that way, that my friends from New York like have no problem with whatsoever. We're going to be a little bit like my friends from, and I'm not picking on folks from New York, my friends from New York are like this. We're going to be a little bit like that. Like, no, we're going to be honest about what we think about the questions. Nothing's written in stone, nothing is sacred. I have a very thick skin. We do this sort of stuff where I work all the time, revise and rewrite and push and pull on questions. The goal is that when we take it out to the community, it's got the information on it and the questions that gets us the information we need. So it's all open for discussion. So with that, I thought we could do this one of two ways. I could just say, what do you think of it? Or we could go through it point by point. Going through it point by point seems like a little bit more organized. So let's do that. All right, so first thing, I did not include the answer scales on here. I could print out the sample surveys that we've used. They run about 20 pages long, the way that surveys are, but for the most part, all of the items are on a 1 through 7 scale. And here is your vocabulary word for the day, marked semantic differential scale, which is a fancy word for something you've all seen before. Where when you pull up, this is from the media use and the economy survey that just got back from the field. So in this, we're not asking this question on our survey, but in this other survey, this is what a marked semantic differential scale looks like. And these are, for the most part, the answers that we use for a lot of these questions, but the answers will change. We don't need to worry about what the answers will be today. The scales that I use have all been validated, so we're really looking at this question content. So it's a 7-point scale. 7 points gives us enough variability that when we're making a decision, a 5-point scale, I'll be honest, is a little bit easier for users to answer because it's only 5 points. But then when we're using the data to make a decision, the difference between a 4 and a 4.5 score on a question and a 3.5 and a 4 become really difficult to make a decision on. And this way, we've got just a little more space in between. And so we can see that maybe it's a 3 versus a 6 as opposed to a 3 versus a 4 on a question. So that's the reason for the 7-point scale. So any questions about that? So when I sent this out, I wasn't thinking that there's not a scale attached to these. And you guys, of course, would be like, well, what's this scale? So most of them will be 7 points.
I have a question that I think even goes back one step from where you are. Who are we surveying? Again, it goes back to outcome. Are we talking about people that live in Waunakee? Yes, probably one segment. Are we going to survey people who don't live here? Because if you say public transportation, for example, no, I don't need it. I live here, my kids go to school, and I don't need that. But if I'm coming, my job is somewhere else, and I don't live here now.
Are we going to do 2 different surveys?
2 different surveys. The commuter survey is pretty much, and I'll circulate that to the group, but that's a much smaller survey that we've done in pretty much the same basic format across 4 or 5 different communities. So I'll circulate that, and if you have comments on it, you can send it back to me. When we release this one, it will go out via convenience sample and via Facebook. We'll do some Facebook advertising where people will be able to click on a link. And it'll be up to us as community members to push it. In addition to that, we'll put some hard copies at the senior center upstairs, the front desk at the village center, probably down at the village offices as well, for folks who don't have a computer, who prefer not to take it on a computer and whatnot. So it'll be a convenience sample. That's that's not necessarily the preferred way to do things, but if we do a mail sample, it takes months to get that organized. The last 2 convenience sample surveys that we've done have actually come back with answers in a population that has, or a sample that's taken the survey that is more representative of the community than the mail random sample surveys that we've taken. We did the same survey in Belleville and Cottage Grove at the same time period. In Belleville, they did convenience sample survey the same way that we're going to distribute it. In Cottage Grove, we sprung for a mail survey from the UW River Falls Survey Center. The Belleville survey sample had 750 respondents to it in a community of like 1,400. And it was almost, when we looked at the demographics, perfectly pegged to what the census said in terms of age and income and whatnot. Mail surveys, nobody opens their mail anymore. Yeah, so it's incredibly skewed. And we get very few people under the age of 35 that will return a mail survey. So that's how we're distributed. There'll be a question, that'll be a feeder question. You'll see a disclaimer on the first page that lets them know who to contact if they don't like the survey, if they have questions. And then you answer yes or no, I'll take it, I'll not take it. If they say no, it sends it to the end. And then the second screen they'll get is, are you a Waunakee resident, or are you a Waunakee commuter, or are you just outside the community? And we will differentiate between those groups when they answer, so that we'll know what the residents answer and what the non-residents answer.
So
Yes?
Is that a question about like the length of the survey and how many people truly fill it out?
Yeah.
And as we get into this, like, do you get more responses if it's somewhat shorter and takes less time versus like a 30 questions that people are like, all right, I'm 15 into this and I give up now type thing, which might be beneficial to know if we want to get as many responses as we can.
Yeah, so we'll keep it to 10 minutes or under. At over 10, there doesn't seem to be, from like the difference between a 5 and a 10-minute survey, we don't lose too many people. If it's over 10 minutes, even somebody like me who's really persistent about taking surveys, because it's what I do for a living, if you call me on my phone, I will take whatever survey they're calling me for. I like goals, the people who do surveys. But after 10 minutes, I get irritated. Yeah. We will have more persistence. So the answers will get recorded. So if they drop out at minute 8, we'll still have their answers for the first part of the survey. It doesn't kick people out. So what we'll find is that when we look at the time, some people will have taken the survey for 26 hours. That's a really long survey. Yeah. And so they open it, they take part of it, they leave, they go to work, they go work out, they write letters to friends, they do whatever they do, and they come back and they take the second half. So, and we'll know those responses. So yeah, so we're gonna try to keep it under 10 minutes. This is a little bit longer than 10 minutes, so some of this stuff, knowing this is all of the options, and we're gonna probably cut some of the stuff you guys can click out, and you know that. Yeah, all good questions. All very good questions. The commuters, when we ask the commuters questions, they'll get a slightly different version of this survey. We're not going to ask them a lot of the questions about what it's like to live in Waunakee, because they don't live here. But we will ask them, would you like to live in Waunakee? Would you plan on moving? And if you planned on moving, what price would you want for rent? What price would you want for a house? What we will find is that with the rent question, that's pretty much uniformly answered across the state because people know what a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom apartment goes for. The going rate for them. People are very sophisticated real estate wise. So those questions will be added in. Theirs will be much, much shorter than the residents. What other questions do you guys have? Yeah.
So if we wanted to go out and like market it as the task group, like if we're allowed to do that, is there like, are we going to have hard copies? Like I'd like to go around my apartment building and be like, I'm on the housing task force, and this would be really useful for you to fill out. Or is it like a postcard, like please go to this website and fill this out? Like how can we do that? And how would we
Yeah, that's how we'll get respondents. We'll all market it and ask people to fill it out. There'll be a little blurb in the newspaper probably for every week that it goes on. And the Facebook, about 76% of the folks in Waunakee are on Facebook. So it's a very low cost thing to run an ad within our geography. If they take it online, they'll click on the link. So email or Facebook, they'll get a link. We can give them a postcard with the link, but it's really hard for folks to do. So if you want hard copies, then I will give you hard copies and then envelopes to put the hard copies in where we ask people to put it in, seal it, and then sign your name on the back. And then we can collect those, yeah.
I'll send that out through school too. That'll hit 8,000 emails.
Fantastic. That'd be great.
Whenever it's ready.
Give it a little blurb.
Yeah.
Because they just recently had the thing for the service from Madison and Rapid Transit.
Yeah.
So, which I was going to bring up tonight, but since it was in the Tribune, I won't.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone's filled it out. Yeah. Or heard about it.
They're going to be doing it for a while.
Okay, good.
I just have a question of, are young people able to fill in the survey, youth?
18 or under, we actually have to ask the school board for approval for, and usually when we do that, we have a separate survey that we give them that has different, slightly fewer questions to be sure, but different questions that might not get at sensitive family information.
Yeah, the kids, they were part of, what was the one you were part of this?
The Greater Madison one?
Yeah, they were big
Oh, yeah.
responders to that one.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay.
So that, when you send it out, it will be to the parents.
Mine would go to parents, but we can get it out to students too if that's the desire. You just have to have a marker to know who your demographic is, you know, where it's coming from.
Yeah. Definitely. We'll definitely do that. Other questions? Are you ready? Here we go. You got your opinions ready? Remember, we're going to be like my friends from New York. We're going to be honest about what we really think. First 2 questions on here, warm-up questions. This one we started asking a year or so ago. We can say challenges, opportunities, issues is a neutral term. Facing our community today, we can answer it, we don't have to ask it. Yes?
I have a question.
Okay.
Community is very broad. Is it community, global political issues are huge right now. Are we going to define community as community of Waunakee? Or how are we defining, like, I know there'd be issues that I put out there that have challenges for the community, but they may not pertain to our local community.
What do you think?
Just
Makes
put the word
sense.
Waunakee.
Yes.
No.
Come back up.
I'll take notes.
You take notes? Okay, thanks. So Waunakee community?
The other side facing the Waunakee community instead of our community.
Okay. Do we like the question?
Yes.
Yes? No? Challenges or issues? Which is the preferred term?
Issues.
Issues?
I like challenges.
You like challenges?
Well, it's just different things, you understand that, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to know the challenges, or you want to know what the issues are.
We can use
Issues
it.
are things that are maybe more easily resolved than challenges. So I don't know what you're getting at, if you just want to know
Problems or
issues that are, you know, like schools, or how to make better, or what's a challenge in this? Sounds different. I don't know, I may be all alone.
Challenges, issues, we could say things, but it's tough. Things. Think it really bad.
Three things.
Challenges.
I
Yeah,
think that'll be one of those.
Yeah, it's more positive.
yeah, I think people get more negative about issues.
About issues. Okay. So
It's
challenge.
funny because challenge is a challenge, but it doesn't seem so threatening somehow.
So issues.
Why do you think issues?
I kind of feel the opposite. I feel
Yeah.
like I feel like challenges is setting up for a negative as opposed to issues might be, an issue doesn't necessarily have to be a negative. An issue can just be, you know, it pertains to my community, but I don't necessarily see it as a negative problem. I just see it as it's an
Something
issue
to work
the community's
through.
facing.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, if more people want challenges, I'm all for challenges. It's democracy.
There have been many survey questions scientifically proven to solve the argument at hand. So, sometimes, yeah.
And then it turned to
Yeah.
issues.
So issues, yeah. Laurel, clearly.
Exactly.
So I guess it really comes down, like, is it problems, or are we looking for just a generic, we're working on these things?
What would you like to know as a committee? Would you like to know problems or no?
I think challenges is better than problems.
Okay.
Right, well, I wouldn't use the word problems, but to me, challenges is like, we have a problem, we're really struggling with this problem. You know, like, it's a challenge to get this problem fixed, whereas issues are like, well, we're working on this, we're not where we need to be, but we're working on it. That's kind
And
of
the
how
challenge has been the roads in Waunakee and getting them all straightened out. And they've done a great job, but that was a challenge for the community. You know, remember the circles and how much.
Is it possible to do
Take
challenges
vote.
slash
Thank you.
issues?
Yeah.
Take all the issues or challenges.
Challenges slash issues, who would vote for that?
That was the question.
Okay. Challenges slash issues.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
I'm curious about one other thing on that.
Yes.
An open-ended question is obviously going to get, you know, any number of different responses. How do we deal with that? It's not something we can quantify. Yeah, you can't really quantify it at the same way.
Well, the same kinds of things keep coming up. Those are
Yeah.
probably the
That's-
things we look
yeah.
at.
We have a highly trained, reasonably well-compensated graduate student named Rachel, who will address that exact thing.
Great,
Yeah.
those will be Rachel.
Yeah, that's Rachel. Yeah, Rachel's the answer. And what we'll produce is a tally of all of the words. We'll categorize them into different groups. This is typically what we do, and then we'll know how many people responded with each of these. And then for visual, when we report out, we'll have that information, that data, but we'll also create like a word cloud so we can portion it so easier for people to digest.
So is there a particular strategy about starting with an open-ended question as opposed to something, because this feels a little abrupt. It seems like that second question is actually more kind of easing people in.
Yeah. What we want to do is, and if we want an open-ended question like this, there's a thing called priming that if we ask people a question about what do you like about your community, it activates all of the positive associations in their head. And so they answer in a way that is consistent with what they've just thought about. It becomes top of mind. So we want this to be, if we're going to ask it to be the first question because it's the fresh question. So they will not have read anything else about, other than they'll know it's a housing survey, so we'll probably get more housing answers than we otherwise might have, because we'll need to let them know what the survey is about. But once we account for that, we want that fresh in their mind. That's also why we ask 3 issues instead of just 1. If we ask just 1 and we've told them it's a housing survey, then what we're going to get is only housing is the answer. Because now they're thinking about housing, right? So, yeah. Second question, now we get into like warming up. We want them to think about the community. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your experience living in Waunakee when deciding when to live here, or when deciding to live here. How important were the following? And then we have a long list of questions or items in here. And this list we've used in all of the different, we don't use this necessarily with housing, but we use this, not just with housing, but with issues on community identity. Cottage Grove, Belleville, Ellsworth, Kewanee were the last 4 communities to use this particular list. So size of dwelling, age of dwelling, quality of schools, family nearby, friends nearby, recreation nearby, shopping nearby, price of house or monthly rent, amount of annual property tax, large lot or yard, restaurants nearby, distance to your own work, distance to a spouse or partner's work. Other residents were similar to me and my family, so getting at what some of us have said, I just felt at home here. And then other, please specify. So do we have anything we'd like to add or delete, or any questions?
Okay, I have a comment about the question.
Yeah.
When I moved to Waunakee 41 years ago, what I looked for then is completely different than what I look for now. Is there a way that we could, because I think more relevant information would be what I look for now. Is there a way of, accommodating that? Because otherwise, what I was looking for when I moved to Waunakee, I mean, a lot of these things didn't pertain, but they would now.
They would now.
What if we were to rephrase it as, what are the most important factors for living in, or, for living in Waunakee?
Yeah,
What would you move to Waunakee today?
If you were going to move to Waunakee today, what would you be looking for?
Why even Waunakee? If you're looking for a place to live, what things are important, or how important is this?
And that's often how we ask it. When deciding where to live, how important are these things? Now, it's two different data solutions. If we ask, why did you move here among these things, then we're getting why people actually chose Waunakee.
Right, it's a historic question.
It's a historic question, but it explains why people are here. When we're asking what is important, we're asking a different question and getting a different set of answers. And there's no right or wrong answer to this, but if we want to explain why people came here, we have to ask them to think back the 41 or the 7
Why
or
wouldn't
8
you ask
years.
full?
We could. So we repeat the question?
But I would move that, if I did that, I would move that second question to a different portion of the survey so that it doesn't necessarily come right after this one. Because I think that scrambles what you're thinking about as you move through the rest.
Yeah, you're thinking of current issues in the previous question, and then you're going, oh, but now you have to go way back then.
Okay. So do we want to ask it twice? And
I'll make it long.
I was thinking that some people live here because they were born here. Some people live here because their employment requires it. I don't know if you want to give that as an option.
Yeah, those aren't typically, we've had those as options before and they're chosen so infrequently that we added other please specify.
How many people were born here? You didn't select.
Yeah.
Choose to live in Waunakee. Choose to continue to live in Waunakee.
Yeah.
Back to your original question, I feel pretty strongly that for information we need is both sets of those. When you move here, why, and when you choose a community, what's important to you. I think we need to know that. If we're going to make a change, or a recommendation for a change, we want to know what people would, if that doesn't exist here, what is needed.
Does that sound reasonable, everyone? Mm-hmm. Yeah? We've never needed to do it. There's no reason we can't. So I'd say, let's go for it.
Let's not we'll get a lot of just everything's enforcement.
Yeah. People will, weirdly, people will think about and make very different judgments. And there'll be some things that they put all 7 or all 1, but they really do think about it. Yeah.
So each of these would have a 1 to 7.
Yes, yeah. Not at all important, very important. Yeah.
Gotcha. I guess, so, and I know I'm skipping ahead because I know that you asked later in the survey, or a potential question is how long you've lived here, or if this is your original hometown, things like that. But for some of us that are maybe newer to, I'm thinking you said you've been here 10 months. I mean, wouldn't we be writing the same answers twice for some people taking the survey?
It would be.
Well, at the same time, when I moved here, again, back in July, I moved here for very specific reasons, but right now, knowing what I know about Waunakee, my reasons have adjusted a bit. I mean, it's been only a few months, but, I mean, it could vary, but if you decide.
I just didn't know how the later questions, how that played into.
Yeah, we'll probably I'll change up the time order, and some of them we'll skip over. If somebody's a brand new resident, maybe we don't ask it. Maybe we do ask it. They'll have to really have to think about that, because maybe your reasons for moving here 10 months ago and what you choose now are to actually change.
Should we ask the question, how long have you lived in Waunakee?
We do. Yeah, we do. That comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question. Number 10 on there is a large lot or yard, and yet number 1 is the size of the dwelling. Do we need to have some consistency there?
They're two
Yeah,
different
but you
questions.
didn't-
Do they mean like the town, or do they mean like your house?
For a dwelling?
Yeah.
Yeah, your house. Yeah. We can make that where you can, a word that's highlighted where you can hover over it. So we say dwelling because some people live in apartments or condos or townhouses, or so dwelling is just kind of it's a weird word. We don't use it for, it's like maybe the only time it's used in a year is the survey. Yeah. Yeah, so should we say size of yard or lot? Oftentimes we ask large lot or yard because in some communities that's a really favored thing.
Yeah, it's slightly more clarified than.
Yeah, than just size. Yeah. So that's why we've used that instead of size of yard. Other people do not want a large yard. Yeah.
But
Well,
large house may not be.
But if we're using the 1 through 7, we're indicating through that how important it was
Yeah.
to whatever our interpretation is.
Yeah.
So if I didn't want a yard, I'd pick like, I don't know, one, yeah, you know, like this is really, I'm not important, but I want a large 57.
And that gives us an interesting point for land use planning. If we think that quarter-acre lots are a necessity for everybody, but then we've got a survey that says, well, a large yard really isn't important to about 40% of the population. That becomes a kind of a really good little gauge.
I'm kind of wondering, it's with those 2 questions of, like, at the time that you made the decision to move to town. I don't know how helpful that would be, again, whether it's 6 months or, 30 years. But I'm wondering if it would be helpful to know why people who live in Waunakee think other people move here. Because if I were asked that question, so I've been here like 14 years, and if I were asked the question, what was in my head 14 years ago as opposed to today when I'm filling out the survey, that's a different thought process for me than if someone said, why do you think people would want to move to Waunakee? Because on some level, especially if you're talking about community and housing and amenities and, what's going to, why there's obviously growth going on, I would be really interested in knowing what people think would attract folks, if it's a negative or a positive. There's some questions just sort of embedded about things like, I don't want people moving here who are different from me and things like that. And I'm just curious if there's a ton of value in knowing that space.
Yeah, so we can only answer questions based on our own perceptions and our own thing, but we can get at that information mathematically. So later on in the survey.
I knew I shouldn't have skipped that class.
Oh, trust me, it was really boring. It was good that you did skip it. Really boring. Really, and I do it every day. So later on in the survey, we ask what type of housing, or what's our exact wording on here? Does Waunakee have enough housing for this type of person? Is Waunakee, or maybe we can put it in here. I'm thinking it might not. If Waunakee, so there are 2 questions, and I think the second question I didn't put, but we maybe will add back in. Typically, I ask a question on here, is Waunakee a good place to live, or Ellsworth or Kewanee or wherever, a good place to live for families, for adults, for senior citizens, for children under 12, for teenagers, for young professionals or tradespeople just starting out. And so we can add that back in because that will answer your question. And we'll be able to use those ratings through the magic of regression analysis to determine how much all of the answers that they've said about Black community amenities, whatnot, how much that explains of whether or not they think the community is good for those different types of people. So we can add that back in. Yeah, and it's a far more effective and valid way than asking, yeah. And I only know that because I've asked that question before, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting as good of the answers I want. Yeah. All right.
Question for the record.
Yes.
There was the question about should you ask size of dwelling or large dwelling? What was the consensus there?
Well, it's size?
And size.
Size.
Size of
You're
dwelling.
looking for small and you want small. Or
You're happy.
you found big.
Well, there's some pretty small lots with big houses on them in Waunakee.
But the two things are actually separate, you can get separate answers.
Is that under
If
other or
it-
what?
if a large lot or small lot came with your large house, your numbers are going to reflect how important that was to you.
That's pretty important.
They don't have to correspond.
Okay. So next question, we'll move on, is each person's experience of living in a community is unique. Please tell us about your experience living in Waunakee. How much do you agree or disagree that people in this community, I would love to take credit for having made up this question block, but I stole it from somewhere else, which we do all the time. And I cite them whenever we write it up. But it's designed to, this particular question block, and I think I've got this marked on the notes that you have, it's designed to measure 3 different things. Items 1 through 3 test perceived connection, how connected people feel to the community. Second one is perceived openness, how open they feel the community is to people. And 7 through 9 are perceived capacity to solve problems. So we test those oftentimes because you want to see if the degree of openness is supportive or not supportive, or if the degree of how, whether or not we think we're going to have an easier or difficult time selling the solution. And I hate to use the word selling because it's so marketing and it has implications. But whether or not communicating the solution is going to be difficult or easy. The community says, yeah, we work together to solve our problems, then it's a lot easier to talk about a solution. If a community says, no, we have a hard time talking, then we do some pre-work and some communication ahead of time where we make a stronger case for this being an issue and we need to step up as a community and solve it. So that's kind of what those questions are for there.
But how about even people being aware of community problems?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you say have a difficult time talking about them, but are they even aware?
Do we put that in it? That might be a really good one to add. All right, let's add that. Yeah, are you aware of community problems? That's a great one to add. Yeah. Other suggestions? Yeah.
Just again, it's in this community. I know you said, tell us about your experience living in Waunakee, but I would keep consistent about that. How much do you agree or disagree that people in Waunakee, just to have it consistent?
People in Waunakee. All right. We'll keep that consistent. Yeah. Other suggestions? All right, so thumbs up for this one, thumbs middle, thumbs down. Thumbs up. All right. On to the next one. Here, this is a weird one. Because housing isn't an activity, or, I guess maybe it's an amenity. So I'm not entirely happy with the language for the question here, I'll be honest. But the idea is there's 2 things going on here. We're going to ask them how often they or someone in their household, not how often, but we should actually X that out. I've changed the language. Would you or someone in your household, instead of how often, would you or someone in your household use the following if it were in Waunakee? Some of these people are going to be like, no, I don't need to use that item. That's okay, because the follow-up question is, even if you don't use it, is it important in the community? A couple of things, I was talking to one of the task force members earlier today, and they pointed out to me that we already have wheelchair accessible playgrounds in Waunakee. I was not aware of that, so we'll cross out number 3. We won't need it. Kilkenny has one, am I correct? that? I'm looking at you, Todd. You have a wheelchair access-
The Tierney Park.
Tierney Park?
Oh, not Tierney Park, the new one, yeah.
Yeah. Do we only have one? I thought there was more than
I
one.
think there is.
I don't know
But
if
I-
we've ever
do the-
distinguished.
Pardon?
I don't know if we've ever evaluated that.
Okay. Do we want to answer that?
Yes, I think it should be there.
Yes.
Okay.
Specific to a certain neighborhood, chances are only the people in that neighborhood know it's there.
Right. It's pretty exclusive with them if it's actually in a big county development. There's not a lot of parking and stuff around those parks.
Yeah.
So is it accessible to people who would really need it then, or is it not?
So we keep it in. I've been asking this all around the state because most communities do not have one, and
I would
it's
keep it in.
because if it isn't in all the parks, then it's not
Okay.
used by everyone. Right. Art and culture venue. That's a really vague one. I put that on there because we had an arts task force last year that was talking about an arts center outside of the high school. We don't know if that'll ever happen, but thought we'd ask if people would use it.
It says if we had it,
Yeah.
would you possibly use it?
Yeah.
I don't see that it is necessarily if we have it, I don't. Oh, if it wasn't,
Yeah.
we have an art venue though, if you consider the performing arts center.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, my art.
So is that one in it? We're putting in these first 4 or 5 because we just want to warm people up and not only have it about housing. So they don't think, on the one hand, we've got the space to ask and we need to ask about something to warm them up. On the other hand, it doesn't have to be any particular item. So is that one a little odd?
I like the culture.
And
I mean,
you-
I like having that there, and then it says something. If you would use it,
Yeah.
even if it is here already, would you use it or do you?
Historical tours or talks? Yeah. Public pool?
Yeah.
Yes, area.
Public transit to Madison?
Interested to see what
Yes.
the answers are.
Yeah. Yeah, public transit within Waunakee?
Yes.
I have no idea what that would look like if we had it.
Little Middleton.
Senior citizen housing, we want to say more senior citizen, we do have senior citizen housing, but we're talking about possibly expanding, so.
But you're asking if they'll use it, not if they want it or.
Yeah, and then we repeat that on the second one. So what we're able to do with these 2 things is A, we can identify if people in the community would actually use some of the amenities, but then ask me at the second time, even if you don't use it, is it important? And that way we can say that, yeah, we may only have 5% of our respondents that said they would use this, but the average rating for this item is a 6.7%. So this is really important for people in the community. So that's why we're asking if you use it. Yeah, rather than just if it's important.
How about adding walking paths and trails?
Walking paths and trails.
Walking/bike or bike trails.
Anything else? Then we get into, and the wording on this, I want to make sure that we get right. I put, just because it was default in my head, family housing, but then I was like, well, wait a minute here. We're not always talking about families. So do we change that to just housing? In 8, 9, and then on 10, we just say housing. So housing, targeting those with annual household incomes, and that should be, our range was 50 to 80,000.
I would rather see just the housing than remove family, because everyone's definition of family is different too.
Yeah,
Right.
And it implies not single people, or
Correct.
yeah.
And you can be your own family.
And that was, I was just typing, and that was
Yeah.
default what came up. My own bias.
How is that different for young professionals and tradespeople?
Yeah.
Is the assumption that they're single?
Not necessarily that lower income, but with a lot of potential for growth, I would say.
Yeah.
How about separating them out, because we're talking young professionals versus those in the trades, there's going to be a financial disparity there probably.
I think the trades might be more than some.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have, started putting saying instead of millennials, we started saying young professionals and tradespeople, because millennials most of them are no longer actually that young anymore. And some of them have children. But we were saying young professionals for a long time, just calling to asking chambers of commerce to have young professionals groups and whatnot, and we got some very valid pushback from folks in the trades who said, we realize a lot of the business owners in any small community are not professionals in that they don't have a college degree. They do not have a white-collar job, and they own the plumbing and the heating firm that's been in town for 20 years. And so we started using, rather than separating them out, we started using them together so that we are, I was totally, like, I got called out on this on the Wisconsin Rural Professionals Conference last year, and I was like, that is the best feedback I've had all year. Yeah, I will change.
Looking ahead at the following question, I almost wonder if we should remove the annual income portion of these, because we touch the annual income portion in the next part, and then whether it's family, single, etc. Like, I mean, you're looking at, activities and amenities. Well, are we looking at income ranges within the amenities, or can we just look at the amenities? Like senior housing is a specific amenity, but like, I'm not going to break up, you can only have this house if you're between this versus this.
We are, and I wish I would have put this one up and not just down here. So one of the things that this question is testing, we're putting it in 4 different ways. So if we're talking about affordable housing, and what this question is trying to find out is that will people react differently if the affordable housing is for 50 to 80,000 versus below 50,000? Like, is one going to be far more supported than the other? So this is a bit of like, we're looking for a hornet's nest. We are actually like sifting through a hornet's nest to see if we're going to get stung a little bit. That's that one. And then the bottom one, we know that the term affordable housing is somewhat polarizing. It's become a word that scares people. So we started using workforce housing about 10 years ago, and now we're not using workforce housing, and it keeps switching the terms. So what I'm looking here is like a little bit of message testing. But what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think I didn't phrase it well. I guess, housing for seniors, housing for young professionals and tradesperson, affordable housing to me is very different than housing with the annual income. Like that annual income, and you're missing huge brackets to me that are Waunakee representative, that if you wanted to put income, we have to do that for senior housing. I need to know for those who have only fixed versus those who have additional, like if you're gonna do annual income, it should go across all the housing, different ones in there, and then I think that messes up your activities and amenities question.
It becomes a much larger question.
Exactly.
Yeah, so what do we want to know about income? I guess that's probably, what do you guys as a group want this question? Yeah, and do you want to know about income? Is this something you want to put up to the general population? Or is this something that you want to make a recommendation for?
Well, I like the test, we're testing how important the community, the people who don't know, see these. Like, the mass amount of people agree that these are relevant priorities. I think that's important.
So the priorities are important.
Yeah, how it follows up on it.
But also, like, how often would you or someone in your house use, would you or someone in your house use senior citizen housing? Would you or someone in your house use housing that is for those who have annual? Well, I know my income. I will fit in one or two. That it's narrowing having those on versus, because you're asking if you use these.
Yeah. And the reason we're asking, would you use those in the senior housing one is a really good example, because obviously if you're like 30, you're answering is you're like, I'm not going to use the senior housing, not for another 25 years probably. Right. But then we can gauge it against that second question. So even if people say they're not going to use it, but I think it's important, then we'll have that data point.
But I think 8 and 9 are, like, you can only follow one of those two.
Yeah. So are
Your comment is saying that those two questions are specifically limiting,
Yes.
Okay.
where the others are
Are
broad and
broader.
open for
Okay.
everyone.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, now I get it.
And I mean, since we kind of touched on the income on the next question, the grid one, that makes me
Okay.
think that we can almost drop the limiting on there.
So I disagree a little bit, if only because, thinking about, you might get a lot of people that answer that question of neither agree or disagree. But you might see some people that say, no, I'm never going to use it. And I think if we're going to get feedback from use the feedback from this, it's maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would help, gauge whether or not, two things. One, if the demand is there for housing that targets that type of income or those types of income, and B, like you said, the hornet's nest, wanting to see if people say, I have no opinion, I wouldn't use it, like I neither disagree or agree that I would use senior citizen housing, but, this isn't how I really feel, but let's say as an example, I said, but I strongly disagree that we need senior citizen housing. And on the income one, it might be, one of those uncomfortable questions where people answer, and since they're answering anonymously, they might answer, but they might say, not only would I, strongly disagree that I would never need housing for target income less than 60,000, but I also don't want that in my community, if that makes sense. So.
Well, I think that maybe my confusion is maybe we don't have two, do we just need housing under this amount versus housing within this range?
I think the question was formulated that way because it's our missing middle numbers, right?
Well, yeah, but I don't know, I just feel like it's still limiting and not correctly limiting. But that's just my opinion, so I think things are really fine.
I think there's also something about what people are actually experiencing in their lives. So, what's happening is there's multi-generations living in households, and those 22-year-olds are still living at home, and so if you think about that survey, you might be having parents that are getting older, you might have, a 20-something living in your basement again, and that if you're actually looking at that question, you could say, yeah, my mom's going to need some senior housing, and my kid, who's not going to make $60,000 a year, could use that. But I think if people, apparently, people out there are dealing with those kinds of issues, and it's very common. And so breaking it down might make some sense because of the way people are thinking about their families.
Do we want more categories? Is that, okay.
I think instead of just saying affordable housing, I think if we've gotten the breakdowns down to 60,000 or less, 60,000 is a lot of money compared to if you're making 20,000.
Yes.
I think you need to have more categories on here for income limits.
And I think my other part is I'm struggling at how this is similar to that art and culture venue. These are,
They are, yeah.
They
They're
should
not.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're night and day to me.
Yeah, oh, they are, they're totally night and day, and the art and culture venue and historical tours and classes, like
Even
the
the parks
candy in
and
it to
even
get
the
people to answer
transit.
the question. We, and we can put that as two separate, we can put this as two slightly separate questions. So they see this, and they get the warm up for it, and then we go into the housing. So that'll take these two questions into 4 shorter questions. Same amount of time, but they still get that warm up. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to put feedback on that part, that if you have two separate questions, you could get at that life cycle thing by asking something like, do you currently need or could you foresee needing any of the following?
Okay. Did you write that down, Sharon?
Okay, all right.
Thanks. Yeah, so we'll break those up then.
That would feel better.
Smaller categories for income, more fine-grained data.
Would it be confusing if, for example, you're looking at number 8 and just say, housing targeting incomes at, and list like A, B, C, D, F, or through F or whatever, and put all of those
to do that
kind of categories in it?
Yeah.
Because that would put everything in,
Yeah.
it would give us an idea of where people are thinking at. I like the fact that you mentioned, the different age groups living in houses now and what could be coming in the future.
Yeah.
And then it can show up again just as easily in that second question with more specificity in their minds as they go into that.
That's a great suggestion.
Yes.
We do that? Yeah? Great suggestion.
And do we care whether or not there's rentals or homeownership? Is this about homeownership or is it just about shelter? Whether people, are we trying to get at that at all?
Maybe one of those categories would be renting.
We do have a question later on in the survey that asks, are there a sufficient number of rental options? And then it lists out different people.
But
We could ask a second question about renting, too, about rentals.
but also, the other end of that is, are there a sufficient number of affordable housing for people to purchase?
Depends on if you think you can afford Kilkenny. Then you're there. So you're okay with that. See, that affordable piece is just always the hard piece.
Exactly.
Because everyone has a different affordability threshold.
Right.
That's why I think it's important that we put
The
incomes
incomes, yes.
instead of just saying affordable.
Okay.
What kind of housing?
Yeah.
For people who make this much, for people who make this much. Because affordable, as somebody had said in one of the meetings, it's how much I can afford, not how much, and that's what people
There's
think
no
of as
definition
affordable.
of
There's no
affordable, yeah.
definition. And I think we need to define what we're looking for in housing amounts.
All right. Great comments. I think we solved some of the problems with this question. Let's move on to one of the next ones. I'm keeping an eye on the time here. Now, this is a big question. So this is the grid. Next is like the rate and number of possible housing options. And I gave you this grid. This is not actually what you'll see. It's a special type of question called a choice question, and we use this when we've got different configurations that we're trying to determine what the optimal configuration is, where the most support will go, where the least support will go. So what people will see is something like this, where it'll say what's in that little square grid, and it'll have like a little graphic that goes with it. And then they'll give it stars instead of a 1, 2. We got to mix up the answers a little bit here. Keep them give some pictures and some stars. It keeps them motivated. Yes.
We're using apartment, but what about condo? Because owning a condo is different from renting an apartment.
Yeah. It is. So we can do a 3 by 3. Here's where we get into a little bit of a, like, we've got to make some choices. If we add a 4th element in.
I mean, I'm not saying add or, but
We can switch it up, yeah. So a 3 by 3 gives them that, I forget how many choices we have when we look back on this. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they've got 24 to rate here. So in terms of, do we have the right elements? It's small house, townhouse, I think I said.
duplex.
Apartment, duplex. We can change any of those up to what we think would be appropriate. The pictures change accordingly. The one thing that I included family configurations in here because some real estate market studies do use this. I don't know if we have a feeling about that. We want to use that and we don't want to use that. It's using some of the resources that I saw. I don't have an opinion one way or another.
What information would that give us that could be useful?
Yeah, it would tell us what people might resist and what they might be more likely to support in terms of language. But I don't know if that's, do we need that? Do we not need that? Is it that a consideration?
And this is on just creating these housing types.
Yeah, so what types of housing units would people be more likely to rate highly? This is like a question that I feel like
I'm saying this,
potential.
okay, you have to clarify this for me. I see housing, the best type of housing being inclusive housing, where you have different incomes and different family structures in the same neighborhood. Not single parent, not senior citizen. People need to have choices. When I'm a senior citizen, I would like to have a choice between senior housing, inclusive housing where there's families and senior citizens, and I don't want to be
Segmented off.
Exactly. I don't want to be isolated. I don't want to feel like I have to go to a certain type of housing.
Right. I actually have a computer customer just like you. She complained, she's in a senior housing right now. She says she's feeling forced that this is where she has to live because these are the only options she has. She doesn't like it at all.
It's the factory model, like in
It's a factory model.
So what I'm saying
segregating age levels.
Yes.
I don't like this.
Okay, I mean, not like, this is the whole question block we can throw out if we don't like.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, maybe this isn't something we want to ask questions, 24 questions. You guys at the back table haven't said much. Do you have an opinion?
I agree with, I don't know that we necessarily need to segment it out by single parent family. I think that would run a risk of we accidentally start, you know, isolating groups for no reason other than we accidentally did almost from the survey data.
Let's hope it wasn't an accident.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think anybody, I would hope nobody would intentionally do that, but I mean, I think that kind of sets a slippery slope of now you have the data and now it's like, well, we have the data, why don't we use the data? It's like, probably better off not.
So is this a question that we like?
Can we ask just the type of housing?
The type of housing, so part of
The
it.
only place we ask really like.
It is,
and we could add
yeah.
things like condos or apartments.
So
Single homes.
Erin's suggestion is the type of housing and
Keep that.
that part? You like that? Okay. Yes.
As far as type of housing, instead of saying apartment and living in condos, why don't you put rentals?
Rentals.
A condo could be a house, could be, but a rental.
Rentals?
Yeah, because condos are, you know, we're talking condos, but condos can either be owned or rented.
And a lot of the townhouses in town, they're being treated like condos.
My only comment was just on the quantity. There's so many questions, and I feel like if I'm seeing a computer screen going next,
It took me a while to figure out what's different between 1, 2, 3.
it's almost like, am I reading the same thing again? Did I glaze over the last question and then answer it the same way? Oh, the sign is backwards this time? I almost feel like I'm gonna glaze right over that.
Okay. So this question block,
I just think it's too much.
gone. And we'll ask type instead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. All right. We just bought ourselves some space. All right, now we turn to the questions. When I was talking to the task force member this morning, I'm like, you know, sometimes when I ask questions, I sweat. This is true, but it's often because we're asking hard things that maybe we need to know the answer, maybe we don't want to know the answer. So the question is, and this is using, this will be validated, we'll look at valid sources. This is Zillow data right now. Currently the median, we'll use, again, this is for the purpose of this question and using this. The median value of a home in Waunakee is around $356,000. The median list price is $425,000. The median value of a home in Dane County is $269,000. The median list price is $219,000. Thinking these statistics, how much do you agree or disagree with the following? Now, this question flat out favors home ownership over rental. It's one of the things that you probably noticed. Whoops, that doesn't have the answers to it. When we're looking at the statements that we have here, this is a list of factors that have repeatedly come up in studies of reasons people do not get behind or support or concerns they sometimes have regarding affordable housing. And I'm using that term in a very loose way, but affordable housing. So I'm worried that the homes in my community are becoming too expensive. Is not necessarily a concern borne out from those studies, but an information point. Generally speaking, residents of Waunakee benefit from higher home prices. Some of the literature shows that people will support legislation or policies that restrict home building in order to maintain higher home prices. I prefer that Waunakee homes are more expensive. I would prefer that Waunakee home prices are about the same. That's just gauging community opinion about that. I'm worried that the cost of homes in our community will make it too expensive for me to remain. I worry about that others I care about, like my children or friends, will not be able to afford to live in Waunakee. I'm worried that other residents of Dane County will not be able to afford to live in Waunakee. I'm worried that, and does this give anyone like, we're those wrong kind of people? And why is it great?
Well, because it just gets at that underlying, that underlayer of what people are fearful about with affordable housing. And,
yeah.
I think I've heard.
It's like the negative piece of information that's really important to know. And also, every time I put something like this on a survey, I sweat. I'm going to get phone calls about this.
Do you need that introductory piece about the median prices? Can't you just ask or make those statements and ask people to agree or disagree?
I was just going to suggest that myself.
Condense it. Instead of making people do the calculations, you could just say the home prices in Waunakee are X amount higher. Like, just give them the information and don't make them read all that and think about it.
Or leave it off.
Or leave it off.
Just say,
we want their base.
Just say, how much do you agree or disagree with the following? I am worried that homes in Waunakee are becoming too expensive. Whatever definition a person has of too expensive, this again goes into that variability that people have based on their own affordability issues.
So leave it off? Show of hands?
I don't think there's anything wrong with having it on there, providing a little bit of background knowledge for people before they fill it out, I guess.
Yeah.
Some people may have an idea in their head, and then when they're reading this, they might be like, oh, that's interesting. I would have thought it was higher or lower, and knowing that might change an opinion, I think. But
Yeah, it's informative.
It's informative.
Instead of putting it in a sentence, just have the block of information. You don't need all those extra words, and it's just the prices you want to stand out.
Do that.
Waunakee, others.
So I'm hearing if we use it, it's got to be simplified.
Yeah. And then maybe in a different location, I don't know if it's really tied to this question, like, is this a good piece of knowledge we want to get out at the beginning of the survey? This is why we're looking at the survey. This is why we're asking to do the survey. Here's some facts that we found out. Okay, now take the survey. Like, should it influence the whole survey instead of starting right at the fears?
We want it not influencing most of the survey. Yeah, we want
I
it
almost wouldn't have it then.
influencing certain questions, but not other questions. So if we put it up at the beginning of the survey, it's going to prime people for home prices when they're answering why did you live here,
Right.
And it'll skew their answers.
Right.
So, yeah, so we put it close to the information that's most relevant to it. Yeah. That's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it because I got to use it with primary.
I wonder why you use the term worried.
So I want to know if they're worried.
Yeah, but there's other ways of phrasing it that's not quite negative.
We wanted, yeah, I'm just going to say concern. Say, worried, concerned, what do you guys think? Do you want to lighten that up a little bit? This is one of those, I disagree strongly, I agree strongly. So they can say I disagree, like I'm not worried at all, or I'm a little bit worried. I'm completely worried.
I know I was talking to some parents who have children that are my daughter's age, and their children do not live here in town. And I said, why don't your kids live here? And their response to me was because they could not afford the homes. And they are educated, college-educated adults with children now who would have liked to come here. Some of them are in the same situation I am. I babysit my grandchildren, they babysit theirs. So we're actually commuting to get our grandchildren because our children are not living here in town, specifically because there's no place for them to live.
Yeah.
So I think worried.
All right, let's have one running close on time here. So thumbs up or thumbs middle, thumbs down for worried. I'm seeing mostly thumbs up. All right, and then the last two questions. Common fears, the value of my house will go down if we build less expensive homes, my taxes will go up. We vote on those as a block. Thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. Thumbs up. Thumbs middle, anyone? Thumbs down. Okay. One thing to keep in mind too is that the majority of this information, we'll prepare a report including some of this information for the public. Some of it will be publicly available data, some of it will just be for our own use and private data. So, all right.
Don't forget about number 11 at the top.
Number 11, you're right. The quality of the schools will decline if we build less expensive homes in Waunakee. That's often, it's been listed on 2 different studies I've seen.
That's a good question.
Okay.
Some people just think that it's something that they think.
All right. Yeah, and it helps us shape the communication. Yeah. All right, and then we get into some questions that are easier. Are you a resident of Waunakee? How long are you here? Have you lived here? I used to ask this by asking people to list the year and then subtracting to find out, and it turns out there's really not much difference between how somebody that's been here 2 years and 5 years asked, kind of group in these categories, so it just makes it easier to handle the data. Second, do you consider your Waunakee your hometown, or is your hometown somewhere else? This is a new question. Never asked this before.
Are you going to do with that answer?
I think it's going to predict, we don't have to use it, but I think it's going to predict, because it'll be interesting to see if people, Waunakee is my hometown even though I wasn't born here. Waunakee is my hometown, do they say that at a certain number of years, and do they answer the other questions differently if they say Waunakee is my hometown?
It's the first question we were asking from each other.
Yeah.
So I've been here for 40 years, I wouldn't consider my hometown.
Yeah, and that'll be an interesting data point.
That brings up another question. Are you a resident of Waunakee, and how many years have you lived in Waunakee? I've been a resident of Waunakee 2 different times in my life period. Do you want combined, or do you want the most recent?
I would combine it.
Right, but is that something that we need to distinctly put in here?
I can put that as an instruction if you
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so moving quickly, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, hometown, the definition of hometown is also different to different people. You know, my hometown will always be where I grew up.
Yeah. For people who moved around a lot, and this is true of people who are people in their 20s and 30s who grew up in families and moved around a lot, their hometown is often an adopted place. Not that because they grew up in so many places. So that's, or if you split your childhood between places. So it'll be an interesting one if we decide to use it. So thinking about when you moved to Waunakee, here gets at the questions we heard of some of the concerns. This is a newer question that we've used. How easy or difficult was it to get to know people? On the one hand, not related to housing. On the other hand, an important data point for a community is something to know. Again, thinking of Waunakee, when you moved here, did you have children? Yes or no? People integrate quicker into a community if they have children in a school system below the age of middle school. Their children are high schoolers when they move here. They're high schoolers, despite my best intentions, do not want me to hang out with their friends. And maybe your kids were different. Mine, if you had kids. I think I'm pretty cool. They don't. Yeah. So how about how old are your children? So we're testing that. Those two can be eliminated if we are tight on time. And then in your opinion, here we get to the renter questions. Are there a sufficient number of housing options in Waunakee for the following types of people? We ask renters in general, renters in family, because bedroom configurations and housing configurations are different. Senior citizens, young families starting out, people with lower incomes, young professionals or tradespeople, people with disabilities. And then we add this 8th one in here. It's a trick question. People from diverse ethnic or religious backgrounds, because it goes back to openness in the community. And there's no reason people can live in one housing configuration versus another, but it tells us a data point. What do we think of those questions? Any alterations? Okay. Nobody knows the future for certain. About how many more years do you see yourself living here? We asked less than 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20. I do not plan on moving from Waunakee. We asked this in Cottage Grove because they're a community not unlike Waunakee where people come in and sometimes have a job transfer. The real heart of that question is if you answer 1 through 3 when you're planning on some sort of move, would you feel comfortable telling us why you might consider moving elsewhere? And that's an open-ended question that Rachel, the reasonably compensated graduate intern, well, she just got a little raise. 25 cents an hour, but still. will collect for us. And then finally, when searching for information about Waunakee issues or events, how often do you use the following sources? This has nothing to do with housing, but tells us how we're communicating and how people are getting information. There's a demographic section that's super standard, age, income, gender, education, that sort of thing that comes after this. That I didn't put on. Yes.
We are missing, who is in the household? Is it your parents? Is it yourselves? Is it your kids?
In the demographic question. Yeah, and that's in the demographic block. How many live in your household? Are there any children under 18? If you live in a multi-family household, you live with roommates, you live with.
Okay, so that is,
check all that
it's
apply.
not here.
No, yeah, it's a standard.
Okay, I was like, did I miss that?
Good job. Important to be. All right, I owe you guys time at the next meeting because it is now 9 minutes past our closing time. Do we have any other questions or concerns that we need to address as a group? Otherwise, I'm free to stay after and talk to you about all sorts of wonderful survey stuff because I can tell you love it as much as I do. Right? But it is cool. It's totally cool. It's fun stuff to do. All right, with that, you guys have if you think about this over the next week or so, and you have questions or comments or concerns, you have my phone number and my email. Feel free to use those. I answer the phone all the time. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm going to take what we did today, and between now and Monday, I'm going to put this all into Qualtrics, and I'm going to send everyone a sample of the survey. This one will not be a draft on every page. It will not be for distribution. Your job is to take it and to point out all of the mistakes, because there will be, no matter how many times I look at it, there's going to be something. The last item on that will say, did you find any mistakes? Do you remember what they were in that? So that'll be the thing. Once we get the survey refined, it'll quickly go through IRB approval because we are doing testing on human subjects. So once the university says, yes, this is not long-term harm to anybody that takes it, then we'll say, I gotta ask them, I gotta ask them. We'll get the check mark, and then I'll send you the hard copies if you want hard copies, the link to everybody. There'll be information in the paper. We'll promote. All right, thank you guys.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second. All in favor?